Welcome to the StarkX Energy Edge, a monthly podcast focused on the latest innovations in building energy applications, efficiency, and total building optimization. In this episode, we're diving into the world of critical power, the backbone that keeps businesses and facilities running without interruption. We'll explore what critical power really means, the hurdles organizations face in keeping their systems resilient, and what businesses can do to maximize efficiency and keep operations running smoothly. Now, here are your hosts, Steve Smith and Jill Spillman.
Good morning, hello, and welcome to the StarkX Energy Edge podcast. We're your host, Jill Spillman and Steve Smith. So the StarkX podcast is a new podcast where we're going to talk all things building and facility solutions, really working on what challenges we have, and we're going to have esteemed panel guests helping me and Jill kind of talk through those situations. Today, we're tackling the topic of critical power, bridging the power gap. Jill, who do we have with us today?
We'll be talking with our in-house experts on power solutions. We have Tom Murphy here and Scott Drabeck. Welcome to today's episode. Over the past 18 months, electricity rates have been rising at unprecedented rates. That's why this topic is so important for this conversation today. Some of those factors include grid reliability challenges, digitalization boom, which has added more load onto that electrical grid, which is causing issues in our customer bases. And then regulatory initiatives that compel investments in technology to protect our power resilience in our buildings. Steve, you want to start asking some questions?
Yeah, sure. So when you think about the fact that projections have that these rates are going to increase up to 25% by 2030, right? Building owners are facing this. You know, you guys encounter this every day. Let's start with this. So what are some of the industries that we're working with that require these types of power systems?
We're definitely seeing power systems in like manufacturing spaces, right, where the critical nature of the operation, if there isn't uptime, right, there's significant value reduction for that business. So manufacturing is a big one. Anything that's reliant on IT, which is most all industries nowadays. Most companies have some type of network hub or a compute stack in a space locally. Call it a server room or a small data center, depending on the nature of the business that they serve. So we're seeing, across all industries, really, the nature of power systems for resiliency purposes is a driving force for capital expenditure and OpEx considerations. Overall.
I think adding that just a little bit too is you take some of those critical environments like the healthcare, pharmaceutical side of the world too. Always resiliency, always that uptime side of it, like Tom mentioned. So it's always critically important to them, in that environment, in that world, to have reliable power, have the uptime, especially when you're dealing with patient care and life-saving solutions. And pharmaceutical, adding into some of the manufacturing side of it, like Tom's talking about. These are areas that we see today putting a lot of focus around their power, their critical power, and really where their energy is going.
Yeah, I used to work at a manufacturing company, and we considered what we did critical, mission critical, right? Because if our product wasn't there, the line stopped, right? But I can't imagine, with these power challenges and power going out and different things, if you're in a hospital setting, whatever, it's got to be huge. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and we see it quite a bit in higher education, right? Higher education, has a receives grants for research and things like that, right? And a lot of that research is stored, in some type of digital infrastructure. So the continuity of power for those applications is high. The distributed networks, that need to be backed up, are critical as well. So that's a vertical that, is heavily invested in the infrastructure that we support typically.
With the rise in utility rates, have your customers been saying to you, we need things sooner than later? Has it changed the dynamic and the urgency around it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, our customers have been very focused for years on just power availability, right? And things like efficiency and the cost of their infrastructure have been, not as critical, because they're just looking at it as I need to ensure that my business operation stays up and can operate. We're now starting to see the nature of rising operating expense challenges from the utility costs, beginning to spike, becoming a conversation piece that they need to plan for.
Yeah, I think it's become this balance, right? There's the rising energy costs, which everybody's always got a focus on. You're trying to balance your operational costs and the rising energy costs with it, and then you're dealing with the fact that you are in a critical nature environment, to some of the places that we just talked about. So you're trying to make sure that you got your uptime, you've got your systems in place, you have utility grids and power grids out there that are being, challenged, and it's affecting how facilities and buildings operate. And then you've also got the energy cost, the operational cost side of it. You've got infrastructure side of it, right, Tom? So it's becoming this whole mix of what's really the most important to the end user, right? And it's a very tough balance. And they are coming to us and asking, what do we do? Where can we go to really mesh the two together, knowing that we have to have uptime, and that requires infrastructure and that requires solutions, but how do we balance that with some more energy efficiency around that part of it?
Yeah, and we're even seeing, the manufacturers that build and supply product in the marketplace. Their roadmap and position in the market is shifting. They're moving away from just being a systems provider for, say, power generation or transfer switching equipment, and they're shifting more towards trying to be an energy management, power management technology company, right? Where some of that is shifting into things like connectivity, or just new innovations in how to help the overall management of energy, versus just being a system that is there for standby or conditioning purposes.
As I hear you guys talk about it, and I think about the dynamics going on, the word that comes to mind is uncertainty, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you talk about the balance and the need for businesses, this is going to affect all of us, right? In our homes and wherever we live. But, we're here talking about buildings and real estate owners and the challenges they face. And, when you talk about they need to find that balance, it's got to be a very difficult time for them, right? They're seeing energy expenses being such a huge part of their P&L, their profit and loss, right? Mm-hmm. Their balance sheet now. So from that, in these uncertain situations, what are steps that you're talking to your clients and customers and partners about that they can take right now to help keep their systems reliable while also kind of setting them up for future success and avoiding some of this cost avalanche that's coming at them?
I think it's a combination of a couple of factors, really, right? First and foremost, it's what's the most important to the customer. What is their overall master plan and their vision? From a prioritization standpoint, we talk about the resiliency, the uptime, you're talking about balancing energy efficiency. And then it's also where that organization, that business, the buildings or the campus may be headed. Is there future expansion? Is there future modification that's going to come with some of their master planning? So understanding, I think, and knowing where they're headed and where they're going helps us to be able to guide maybe some paths forward. What are some of those solutions going to look like for them? You can still get resiliency. You can still get uptime with modern technologies, with solutions, as long as you're looking, forward enough to make sure that solution is going to fit for you. You don't want to limit yourself in terms of capacity. You don't want to limit yourself in terms of manufacturers that may lock you down or limit where you can go with your buildings and your solutions in the future. So leveraging some of the direction and the overall strategy and the master planning, for the customers. So, a lot of what we're trying to help facilities and customers do is put together a strategy to go forward, right? And balancing the most important things of course, you have to have uptime, especially in these critical environments. How do we help them become more energy efficient? How do we look at those solutions going forward? Integrating technology into these systems and really holistically making sure that building is working together, right? Are all the systems and everything within those four walls really working combined together and making your building the most efficient that it can be while giving you that resiliency?
I was going to add, I think, it's hard to know where you're going if you don't know where you are, right? So, in a facility, awareness to how you're utilizing power and where is energy being consumed, not just at the kind of the critical path, output side, but more through the distribution chain of your infrastructure. Where are you using power and where is power stranded? In the past, I think, a lot of places a lot of clients would just distribute power kind of in a reactive ad hoc way when something new came into their building that they needed to support. We're now running into rising densities at the load side. So that is creating challenges for where and how do I feed this, from the infrastructure, and do I have enough power available, and where do I get it from? So those are new conversations that I think are introducing. Maybe 5, 10, 20 years ago, did you have a power management strategy in your building? If you don't today, it's limiting you for being able to plan, on a move forward basis. So initial investment is to create awareness and leverage systems, such as metering and software, in order to paint that picture for you.
It sounds actually really complicated and a little overwhelming. So how do you attract, like when you're talking to a customer about it? I mean, if I were sitting on the other side of the table, I would be like, I don't even know where to start. So what's your advice to them? How do you start it?
I think it's have a good partner is key, right? I think having a partner that can really help you navigate through that and break down some of that complexities, right? It really does start simply with understanding your facilities and your building and developing that roadmap forward. And as Tom mentions, let's leverage the data that's inside these facilities and the information. There's a lot of systems that have the technology or have data that's really embedded or baked in out there into these systems that maybe hasn't been utilized and now can be utilized, because that's really going to start a path forward of, where are you? How does your facility maybe stand in terms of its needs and where it has capacity or where it has some deficiencies? And then how do we start to look at that roadmap forward for a customer or for a building to say, okay, here's where you got some areas where we can improve on. Is it energy efficiency, because that's part of the focus? Is it more capacity? Is it reliability? You start to look at all the things that start to factor into that. Out of that data, you start to be able to see things like power quality issues and things like that. So you want to get all of the cards on the table, so to speak, but make it in a really simple manner, and then just start to build, I'll say, the foundational blocks of that path forward. Nothing has to happen overnight, but at least knowing that path and where you can go and start to maybe put some of those pieces together simplifies it a lot.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you certainly can take a top-down approach, right? So every organization has a utility bill, and they have a partnership with that utility. Understanding, from a top-down perspective, how much power do I have? How much does that cost to use, right? And then, beginning a process to roll that through your infrastructure, is a typical way that we see customers try to start to understand it if they do not have systems today that help them. That's a step one. Then of course power gets distributed through to various points, and you can kind of cascade that downstream, to get a better understanding. But overall, you got to pick a place to start. If you start at an application inside of a facility, that gives you a glimpse, right? But then you're always trying to connect the incoming, kind of holistic picture with the downstream application, and you got to be able to put those two puzzle pieces together. So it is complex, and most, broader enterprise type clients are relatively sophisticated, and they have engineering, and technical resources on staff. So it's really, one of our responsibilities is to just help them understand what is available in the market, and what innovative technologies are forthcoming that we can, just educate them on as tools for them to use.
So this conversation has been really exciting and great, and there's a lot to kind of digest. Can you maybe give me an example of a customer or a client that we have worked with that has needed this type of deep dive into what their data is saying and where did we take it?
Yeah, I think a good one is a manufacturing client and customer of ours, very international type of customer who is someone we worked with for a long time, but relative to the whole conversation today, they started to be challenged with reliability goals, but looking at energy efficiency and particularly decarbonization, right? So they started building out a sustainability plan of where their organization was going to go. They had goals they had to meet for the customers that they're building products for or shipping products to. So really, in that same scenario, it started with understanding their goal, their mission. Where are we trying to go with it? What is the priorities? And it was a balance. Everything we just mentioned, from efficiency to resiliency to decarbonization. So you really pull it all together. And in doing so, you start to work with that customer and their teams. You start to evaluate where they're at your baselining and benchmarking, taking a look at where they're at and what's it going to take to get there. And then you start to develop that roadmap forward, and you start implementing things like new electrical infrastructure, new solutions around battery storage. Maybe it's solar, it's power metering and power monitoring, right? It's kind of balancing a little bit of, what used to just be focused around energy management to now energy management and power management, especially when you start to talk about decarbonization and how we can help organizations really be able to get there. So looking at the new technologies, looking at new power solutions and alternative solutions, helping them be able to run more efficient is kind of the way that we've been able to pull some of this together and holistically look at a number of buildings and facilities for them on an international scale to start being able to meet and achieve some of their goals.
Yeah, wow, that makes a ton of sense. And again, what an interesting time. And I think next time we have you guys on, we'll talk a little bit more about solutions, right? And options that, how does the market respond to these various challenges? But I think, kind of just to recap a little bit, today we touched on a lot of like power management and energy planning start, right? To tackle issues around power. Some of my key takeaways, and again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but first of all, you got to know where you're at, right? So data is king, right? You got to be able to monitor where you're at, get the data so that you can start to establish some baseline, whether you start with an application and grow or you start in a specific area. You can't manage what you don't measure. So we need to start there. Then it starts picking a partner, right? Starting to put together a plan, a roadmap, right? That has to be aligned to the company's goals, right? Some of the companies are just trying to keep their operational costs down. Some companies have decarbonization initiatives like you were talking about, Scott, right? So there's different factors there. So I think it starts with those two major areas and then it's all about building the solutions, which again, we can maybe talk about another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we look forward to doing that.
Yeah. Great. Well, a big thank you to Tom and Scott. Great job, guys, as our panel guests. We look forward to having you here. Your time and insights and experience are really helpful. It really sets the stage for the conversations we'll be having going forward. And of course, thank you to our listeners. Your support means everything as we kick this new podcast off. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We have plenty more to come as we continue exploring how facilities can remain resilient, efficient, and prepared for what's next. Until then, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on StarkX.
Thanks for listening to the StarkX Energy Edge. Have a question or an idea for a show? Email us at marketing@starktech.com. We'd love to hear from you. To learn more about total building optimization, visit starktech.com. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time here on the StarkX Energy Edge, a production of StarkTech.